This is my best friend, Tim Welch. I mean, me and Tim Welch are like this. Inseparable. If you want to know something about Tim Welch, you might as well ask me, because I know everything about the guy. That's how close we are. He also, outside of our friendship, coaches Sean O'Malley sometimes. Okay? Which is why he's relevant to this video. And he said something about the Yan versus O'Malley scoring and the reactions from certain people that work for the UFC to the Yan versus O'Malley scoring that, to me, might be one of the most bulletproof pieces of evidence to say that the UFC is biased in who they're giving decisions to I have ever heard in my entire life of watching this sport. I've never heard anything like this. I need to play it to you guys because it's been on my mind. Listen to this.
There's a lot of super smart people, Kenny Florian, John Anik, that were like, Sean won the fight.
Which is fine. John Anik, Kenny Florian, they can have their opinion. Okay? But this is the craziest part. And I want to break down the words that he said and what it means. Okay? Listen to this next bit. The first part, okay, Kenny Florian, John Anik, I don't mind. Listen to this next part that he says.
They did. Another guy, a UFC guy, Cage Side, was like, if Sean loses that fight, whoever says he loses is getting fired. I don't think he was talking about the judges, but yeah. I'm like, damn.
A UFC guy that was Cage Side said when the decision was before the decision was announced, by the sounds of it, if Sean O'Malley loses this fight, if you think Sean O'Malley lost, you're fired. And I don't know if he was talking to the judges, which means that he probably was referencing the judges, because otherwise why would he have said it in that moment? He also said if Sean O'Malley loses this fight, which means that he said this Cage Side before the decisions were even called, which is just absolutely crazy to hear. But that is the craziest thing I've ever heard. Listen to this again.
UFC guy, Cage Side, was like, if Sean loses that fight, whoever says he loses is getting fired. I don't think he was talking about the judges, but yeah. I'm like, damn.
Maybe he's just coping because he knows that he's got to defend O'Malley, his boy. I get it. Okay? But that is the craziest thing I've ever heard anyone say about anyone who works for the UFC. A UFC employee, probably a higher up guy if he's Cage Side as well. Probably someone very important if they're Cage Side. Not just like front row. They're Cage Side to where Tim Welch can hear them from like the corner of his fighter. If this is true that this happened, that's crazy. A UFC staff member said before the decision was called, because he says if Sean O'Malley loses this fight, whoever says that he lost is getting fired. In Abu Dhabi, when the commission is the UFC, one of the only places in the world where the UFC are the commissioners of their own fight. I believe anyway. Don't take that last bit as bulletproof evidence, but I'm pretty sure the commission in Abu Dhabi is the UFC, as far as I'm aware. But even if it's not, though, that's crazy. To hear someone that works for the UFC higher up, enough to be Cage Side, say that out loud. In such a close fight that it was, where you can't definitively say that O'Malley won, but you can argue that O'Malley won. This isn't like, Holloway Cater, where maybe something like that would be acceptable. If any judge gives this to Cater, they should be fired. Or not that, because it's so obvious, but you know what I'm talking about. A real clear-cut win that one fighter got over another fighter, where you could appropriately say something like that. This is such a close fight, and it could go either way. And I think a lot of people are rewatching it and thinking that O'Malley won. I still think Yan won that first round. Okay? It's really opinionated on that first round. For a UFC higher up to say.
The guy, Cage Side, was like, won the fight. They did. another guy, a UFC guy, cage side, was like, if Sean loses that fight, whoever says he loses is getting fired. I don't think he was talking about the judges, but
yeah. If Sean O'Malley loses this fight, so this is before the judge's decision has even been made, whoever says that he lost is getting fired. In the closeness of the fight that was, where the majority of people think it was a robbery, I need to speak to Tim Welch. I need to know if that's true. Just for my own brain to come to peace with this, okay? I need to know if that's true. I don't think he was talking to the judges. He kind of corrects himself afterwards. But that sounds an awful lot like he's talking about the judges. Before the judge's decision has been read out, if Sean O'Malley loses this fight, whoever says that he lost is getting fired. In a fight as close as that, knowing how they feel about O'Malley as a potential star in the bantamweight division anyway, in a fight as close as that, if a UFC staff member that's high up in the promotion enough to be cage side in Abu Dhabi at UFC 280 really said that out loud, that is absolutely crazy. Like and subscribe if you agree. Thank you for watching. That's ridiculous. And it makes me concerned, in all honesty. I don't think it was a robbery. I don't think it's like a rigged decision. But I need to speak to Tim Welch. So maybe I'll go on the next episodes of the Red Hawk recap and we'll break it down. But man, if that genuinely happened, a higher up in the UFC staff screaming cage side before the decision is even called, Sean O'Malley, if Sean O'Malley loses this fight, whoever says that he lost is getting fired. And I believe strongly, confirm this in the comments, Abu Dhabi is basically like the only place in the world that the UFC can go to where they are their own commission and they actually do have a control over the judges. It's such a weird collaboration of things that are so convenient to say that this was like a bit weird. And I don't think it needed to be weird. You can genuinely give the fight to O'Malley. Like, I don't think it's a brutal robbery or anything like that. But that's just so weird to hear about a fight that close where Yan can win that fight and the majority of people watching think Yan won that fight enough for like people, like someone was talking about no actual UFC fighter scored that fight for O'Malley. They all scored it for Yan. And for a UFC higher up to be saying that cage side in one of the few times where they actually could fire a judge is pretty weird. See you later. Goodbye.